Welcome to the Feed Your Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Jill Dobrowanski. This is a space where I sit down with friends and share stories of hope and encouragement with a whole lot of Jesus sprinkled in. At Feed Your Spirit, I like to say that we are imperfectly perfect people who are uplifting others through grace-filled encouragement. I am so happy you joined me today. As we walk with determination to consciously live in God's Word, I invite you to plug in, prepare your heart, and feed your spirit. On today's episode, I chat with my friend and fellow podcaster, Patricia Sung, from Motherhood and ADHD. Patricia and I sat down and talked about her diagnosis of ADHD Inattentive Type at the age of 20 years old. She was very candid about the effects on her daily life as a wife, mom, and her ministry, which shows moms that they are not broken, alone, or different. They are loved. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did having it. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Hi, how are you? I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I'm so excited to have you on. All right, so let's just jump right in. So you are the host of a website and a podcast, Motherhood in ADHD. So let's kind of, before we get to all the things that you do within that, let's talk a little bit about ADHD and maybe tell my listeners why this topic is so close to your heart.
So ADHD is a neurological medical condition that affects somewhere between 5 to 10% of the population, no matter where you come from, your background, where you live, your race, your color, your creed, any part about you. This is a similarity that runs through humans as a whole. And there are so many misconceptions that are out there about what it is and what it looks like and what it means, that God placed it on my heart that I need to go out and share my story. I was diagnosed when I was about 20 years old, and be willing to be vulnerable and let Him shine through the words that I speak and give encouragement. I have such a heart for moms who have ADHD because of all of the, I'm sure we'll get into it, but all of the difficulties that come. It's hard when you're by yourself, but then when you're responsible for other people too, it just piles on the struggle. And there are so many women who know they have it and are struggling, but there's also so many women that don't know that that is why they're struggling. And if they knew why they were on the struggle bus, they would have the ability to figure out, oh, well, if I just modify some things and I learn some strategies and figure out what works for me, then I can be successful too.
20 is fairly late to be diagnosed. I mean, I've been in education for almost 18 to 20 years now, and I'm so used to seeing, my littles come through and getting them and getting the parents the help and the support and the diagnoses that they need. 20 is, older on the spectrum of being diagnosed. Did you struggle all throughout? And then you were just finally like, yes, here's something I can now identify with. Was it almost like a sense of relief?
Well, I guess first I want to address that on one hand, it does feel very late. On the other hand, it also can be very early. There are some women who are being diagnosed at 40 and 50 and 60.
Wow.
And they struggled their entire life, not knowing that this was the struggle they were carrying. So on one hand, sure, I sure wish somebody would have noticed at the beginning, but also I am so thankful that I was diagnosed at 20 and was able to get help in order to get through college. So I want the people listening to know that you can still be diagnosed as a grown-up. adult ADHD is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many people who, slid under the radar all this time and don't find out until later. But to go back to your original question, it's interesting because ADHD is kind of like a marinara sauce where everyone's has some kind of like the basic tenets. So, tomato sauce always has tomatoes and some spices. And, you have those similarities as a whole. But then when you get into it, like if you ask 10 Italian grandmas how you make pasta sauce, you're going to get 10 different recipes. So everyone's ADHD looks different. Some people are going to struggle more with working memory and maybe not so much with something else. And then other people are going to struggle with, say, their procrastination in terms of planning, or maybe they have other comorbidities, and comorbidities is just a fancy word for like friends that come along with ADHD. A lot of people with ADHD also have things like anxiety and depression and learning disabilities like dyslexia or dysgraphia, a lot of addictions and basically coping mechanisms gone wrong with drugs and alcohol or porn or shopping addictions or gambling. And you end up with quite a variety of recipes. So everyone's ADHD looks different. And for me, I have inattentive ADHD. So I always say I'm not hyperactive on the outside, but my mind is hyperactive. My brain goes constantly. It never stops moving. And so from the outside, I looked fine. I mean, I was a great student. I was on the honor roll. I was in several different clubs. Like in high school, I held different offices. I looked like I had it all together. But on the inside, I was this little gerbil running on the wheel at speed 10 all the time to keep up. From the outside, yeah, it looked fine. But on the inside, my anxiety and the worry and the perfectionism that I had taken on as a coping mechanism myself was extremely unhealthy. But of course, that's the thing about being human, is that we can't see what's going on inside someone's brain. We don't know the struggle that they're dealing with until they open up and say, I am really struggling with this anxiety. I'm torn up on the inside with this struggle. And that's what brought me to here when God was like, you need to share this story. I was like, Lord, you've lost your mind. Absolutely lost your mind. Because I had spent my entire life, usually the term they use is called masking, of, you put on your outside happy face and everything's okay. And you learn to assimilate into what everyone else expects of you. But yet on the inside, my perfectionism was literally driving me crazy, where, you get this message when you're little that, will you keep making these careless mistakes?
Yes.
And to me, like, I know I double checked my work. So I start thinking as, like a third grader, oh, well, checking it twice wasn't enough. I should check it 3 times and then I'll get it. And again, and I would do that. I would check it 3 times and I would still get back, oh, you made some careless mistakes, because my brain didn't catch those things. But the thing is, if my brain didn't catch it the first time or the second time or the third time, is it going to catch it the 7th time? Probably not. Let's be honest here. So it's not that I was doing anything incorrectly. It's that I didn't have the tools and the structure and the strategies in order to accomplish that goal. But, when you're a third grader, it's not like you're saying, hey, I'm not understanding this concept. You just internalize of when someone tells you you're making a careless mistake, that you need to be more careful. And I mean, I could go on a whole soapbox. I mean, because I was a teacher as well before I had my boys. I could go on a whole soapbox about careless mistakes. But so I don't know. Like, obviously, I wish somebody would have caught it along the way, but I don't know how they could have, given that, I mean, it was the 90s and it really wasn't well known at that point. It wasn't well understood. And the people who were getting diagnoses are the people who were very hyperactive. When you think about ADHD, you think of the 5-year-old boy who's bouncing off the walls and, just can't seem to sit still. He won't listen to what I'm doing. He's driving me crazy. That's the picture we have. And that's what gets diagnosed, because it's irritating. it's annoying everyone else. And so everyone's going, what do we do about this problem? We got to fix this problem. And that child will get the help, maybe not necessarily the best help, but they will get the attention and they will move forward in the process.
Yeah, it's a physical manifestation.
But the people who are like me, where it's more inattentive and it's, flying under the radar, we're not causing a problem. I was too shy. I was too quiet, not the kid jumping off the desk and doing parkour in the middle of science class. So, I can look back and be disappointed that nobody caught it, but also I feel like that's part of my mission now is explaining to people, what does this really look like? What are the, maybe not warning signs, but like, what can you look for in younger children, the kids that are labeled as the space cadet or the daydreamer or lazy or don't want to put in any effort, or, I keep telling them this and they just don't do it. Those are the kids you should be looking at going, ooh, that's a problem. That's telling me, there's my little flag waving that this kid might need some help, instead of just labeling them as lazy or not wanting to do it or too busy doodling. It's a bummer. So really, I didn't get diagnosed until I was in school, in college. It was my freshman and sophomore year. I almost failed out because all of a sudden I went from being very structured in high school to college, where I'm responsible for showing up to class at all these irregular times, instead of you show up at school and you just go down the line, boom, boom, boom. I'm the one responsible for reading 150 pages by next week. I'm the one responsible for listening to the class notes. Oh, but wait, I slept through that class. I didn't take the notes, so I don't have that information. And, all of a sudden you end up with this snowball where basically failing out. I was on probation for my scholarship, and thankfully, thank the Lord, I had a doctor who looked at me and goes, I think you have ADHD. And I literally looked at her like she was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Granted, this is probably 2000. It just wasn't even considered as a thing that girls had. But also at 20, what? It was just kind of mind blowing. And the other good part is that I was in college, and she said, okay, I'm going to send you to the Student Services Center. You're going to do this, evaluation there. And it turns out that there was a young lady working on her master's in this area. And so I got to sit down with her, and she did a huge battery of tests, and I was part of her case study for her master's thesis. And I learned about what it was. And she had a friend who was in law school who had ADHD. And that wonderful young lady took me under her wing and said, okay, this is how you study with ADHD. Here's how you break things down. Here's how you take notes. And I kind of went through like a 3-month boot camp with her, where I would go to the law school library and study with her, and she would teach me little tips and tricks and had me listening to white noise so that I could block out all the other noise and focus on my work. And I'm so thankful that I had this circle of women who God placed in my life and allowed me to learn the tools and figure out what I needed to do to graduate.
One of the things I want to touch on, because I know that you were also, you were walking in faith at the time. Did you ever question, like, God, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? Why this for me?
Oh, for sure. I think that's actually the words you said are one of the phrases that I hear from women so often. Like if I had $1 for every time some women told me, why can't I get it together?
Yeah.
I literally could be out here like feeding half the population. It's crazy how many women are like, why can't I just get it together?
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks my heart to know that they feel like it's them. They feel like it's their fault, that they're broken. They can't fix it.
Yeah.
And you can't fix it. It's not something that's fixable. This is part of your brain structure. Just like if you have someone who has diabetes, you can't yell at it and tell it, make some insulin, body. Like that doesn't do anything. Or like if you have eyeglass, you'd be like, come on, eyes, work better.
Yeah.
That just, you can't fix it. It's not possible. But what you can learn is how does my brain function? What works for me? Where are the strategies? It's just like getting a wheelchair or eyeglasses or, you know, insulin shots, all those things. They don't fix the problem, but they allow you to function better on a day-to-day basis.
So true.
I mean, I wish I could say that I still don't question God, but of course I do. Like, I also have a chronic illness and I've been extremely sick the last 10 months. And there's been plenty of times where I'm like, God, why would you give me this burden? Like, I already got burdens. I don't need some more, Lord. I also know that He has given me the ability to work through it, not to fix it, not to solve it, and that He is then going to use that in some way that I don't understand at this point. And I surely didn't understand in college when my life was falling apart. Why is this my burden? Why is this my struggle? But through that experience is how I can then reach out and bless other women and say, you're not alone. It's not you. It's not your fault. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. In fact, most people who have ADHD they try the hardest out of everyone and they don't get the results that they expect based on watching everyone else who doesn't have this problem around them. And they think, why do I bother trying? I'm doing all the things that, Pinterest mom over here is doing and it's not working. So why do I bother trying? And people get discouraged. I mean, obviously, if you don't know that's why, if you're the guy in the wheelchair running the marathon and you don't have your wheelchair, you're going to look around and be like, how am I supposed to get there? But when you get the tools that you need, you're probably not going to beat the marathon winner, but at least you can get to the finish line.
Exactly. I was just thinking too, taking a step back and saying, questioning, like, how many more burdens do you want me to take on? I have a very dear friend of mine who's in stage 4 kidney failure. And she is going through the entire process of getting on the transplant list, which is a very lengthy process of all the testing. But then on top of it all, come December, oh, guess what? You've got COVID. Oh, and you have pneumonia on top of it all. And so she literally was in her house for a month on oxygen for a little bit. But, thank goodness she's fine now. But it was like, she and I would have some lengthy conversations where she would just call me and she'd be not angry, but just questioning. And I had to keep reminding her, like, what you're going to be going through with the transplant, you're going to need what you're learning now in order to get through that recovery process. So like she had to learn, like I did too. She had to learn how to be still and just not be able to work, not be able to just run to the post office, and rely on others. Thank goodness she's got a healthy church community and they delivered meals and, went shopping for her and did everything that she needed. And so, we also talked about it. Like you have to learn how to rely on others who are working for the good of God to help you. And so, I mean, that questioning is something that just comes from our flesh, comes from us. And, many people say, like, we don't know the answers, we don't know the outcomes, but it's in this waiting, in this hallway that God is doing his best work.
Right. And that is not what you want to hear.
No.
When you
No.
have a burden. It's like I don't want to hear that I'm learning. I just want it to be over. I want it to be fixed. And it doesn't feel good to hear that.
Yeah.
That's not what you want.
That's it.
But also there is nothing someone else can tell you or like say that's going to fix the problem. It's just not.
No.
That like what you're hoping for isn't there. Like I can't be like, well, I just, if someone could just give me the magical advice to solve it. Like, no, it doesn't exist. And so we have to set aside that, like you said, that human fleshly desire. I mean, on one hand, God created us to always be pushing for better. So that is a good thing. But we also have to recognize that sometimes we just have to wade through that horrible time to get to the other side. And we may never understand the purpose behind that struggle.
Yes.
We might get lucky at some point, 5-10 years down the road where we hear like, yes, that was what that was for. But, a lot of times we don't.
I know. Actually, I just had a guest on, Sarah Wilson. She's a dear friend of mine from Tennessee. And she was talking about after her daughter was diagnosed with such a rare genetic disorder and everything that goes along with it, and accepting the fact that her time on this planet is going to be very limited, but also very full of struggles, physical, emotional, everything that goes along with that. We were talking about, she's like, I just wanted somebody to show up with a casserole. Like, that's all I wanted. I didn't want like take 2 Bible verses or call me in the morning or, oh, you know what? You must have done
Oh,
something.
geez.
Were you gossiping? Did you
Oh,
have a
geez.
sin that maybe
Yeah.
God's doing? Right? You know what I mean? And she goes, no, that's not what I needed. I needed a casserole, or I needed somebody to just sit in a room with me while I cried and not say a word.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard gift for us to give,
Yes.
is to just sit with a friend who's struggling and let them vent it all out
Mm-hmm.
and not try to fix it for them, and not encourage them to see the silver lining and all that, like to just sit with them and let them bear their soul and their burden and just sit there and hold it with them. That is a very hard thing to do, but such a beautiful gift that we can give someone who's struggling.
That's it. And especially if that person who's struggling knows that you are not coming to them and going to then judge them
Mhm.
or going to, try to make it better, quote unquote, but just
Right.
be there and hold your hand. And like you said, for those of us who do it, it's, first of all, it is such a beautiful gift when somebody opens up themselves and are that
Mhm.
vulnerable and that raw with you, but then also to just be. And that's what it's all about. It's like, just be in my presence.
Yeah, and be willing to, hold that space and not judge. It is hard to open up. I mean, I can think back to that when I first agreed, like my little agreement with God of like, okay, I will do this. You asked me to do it and I will do it. It took me several months to work through that and to like hit publish that I'm going to put my problems out on the internet was like, what did I just do? And that is just another layer upon it. Like I'm trying to, how do I word that? It's different. Like I'm putting it out on the internet for anyone to hear, and that's a different vulnerability. But when someone's looking at you face to face and sitting in that room with you and opening up for the first time, I think that's almost, I would say it's harder.
Yes.
That first time where you're willing to open up and spill your guts on whatever you're dealing with, than when I hit publish. I had already at that point, been talking about this for a little while and making sure that I was okay bearing my soul to others. But that's quite a gift to give someone.
It is. And, I want to go back to something we were talking about and throw motherhood into it all. Like, why can't I just get it all together? Like, I know so many moms who just feel that way normally without adding in a diagnosis. And so, what does motherhood look like for you with this diagnosis? But then, how do you support and guide others just through, like you said, that getting past looking at that Pinterest mom or that Instagram reel or that perfect photo of, the family in the matching pajamas in front of the perfect Christmas tree, And it's like, and you're sitting there going, I just want my kids to fix breakfast for themselves, So talk to me a little bit about what motherhood looks like for you.
So as a general rule, it's hard for people to wrap their heads around neurological medical condition. And, I can get all into like the actual like biology and chemistry and all that. But to me, what is the most glaringly obvious problem is for people with ADHD is they have a lot of executive functioning struggles. And executive functioning is like the conductor of the orchestra that's keeping all of the moving pieces going. So while you might have a perfectly good drummer and a really great violin separately, when you're trying to do all the pieces together, you're not doing a good, like your conductor is broken and he's not keeping the drummer on beat. And he's not telling the violin to come in when it's supposed to, or telling the trombone to quit making noise over there. And it's that conductor orchestra analogy that I really feel like brings it to life. Of, you might be like, well, I'm really good at remembering stuff when I sit down and focus and I'm just worrying about this one thing. But in real life, you never get to do just one thing at a time. You're constantly juggling. So then when you take motherhood, it's like you took this conductor job and put it on steroids, because now you're not just worried about your doctor's appointments and your schedule and making your breakfast and brushing your teeth. Now all of a sudden you're brushing however many kids you have. It's like all of a sudden you get exponentially more difficult, because I feel like you add one kid and it's quite the shock when you add a kid to your life. But when you have, say, 2 or 3 or 5 kids, it's almost like you're hitting exponential levels because of all the juggling that has to go in between. So not only do I need to now figure out what I'm doing plus my spouse, now I have a kid, but I also have to juggle the relationships in between all those. So I'm juggling multiple schedules, but I'm also this kid versus my husband's schedule. That's not even my schedule at all. And I'm trying to juggle all those people, making sure all the teeth got brushed, getting all the people out the door in the morning, remembering all of the, annual checkups and dentist appointments and permission slips. I mean, all of a sudden you think about how much stuff a parent does, it's mind blowing. But when your conductor is broken, I mean, you've just got a big hot mess dumpster fire at that point. So it's hard. And what I strive to do through my podcast is to let moms know, like, you're not alone. You don't have to strive to be the Pinterest mom. Like, you don't have to have this super fancy chore chart, or like if you're potty training, trying to, do this giant sticker thing. Because when you have ADHD, trying to keep up with your kid potty training alone is hard. But then to remember that you're supposed to be doing stickers, and just like on like an aside, like discipline is a huge area where parents with ADHD struggle, because it involves so much consistency and setting up like a system ahead of time. And then in that moment, remembering, okay, I said earlier that if you did this, this was the consequence. In the moment, you're now frustrated and angry. And part of your executive functioning is your emotional regulation. So you have another like common ADHD analogy is you have a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. So your anger is flying from 0 to 100 in half the time of a normal person, but yet your body doesn't have the capability to rein that back in. And you lose it on your kid for using Sharpie on the wall. And now you've got to repair the Sharpie problem. You've got to repair apologizing to your kid. You have to repair your own self-shame and anger at yourself. And all of a sudden you get this tornado effect where it's not just the original problem. Now I've got the 6 dominoes that went into play with that. And so many parents, and obviously my podcast is specifically for moms, they look around and say, how come all these other parents can do it? How can they remember all the permission slips and the class parties and they can keep up with all this stuff and I can't? And they're beating themselves up for not keeping up. But when this is why I'm struggling, you can put your strategies into place that work for you. And I know that a lot of people will look at the things that I recommend and think they're totally ridiculous. Why would you write on your morning schedule to brush your teeth? Doesn't everybody just brush their teeth? No. When you don't have ADHD, you don't remember to brush your teeth. You have to have that reminder there. And if you don't, all of a sudden you'll be sitting in a 10 a.m. meeting going, did I put deodorant on? And you want to beat yourself up because you're like, how does a normal person not remember if they put deodorant on? But when I get into my like one of my strategies is just having like a very specific
Yeah.
morning routine. When I get on a roll on that, my brain runs in autopilot and it does not catalog all of those steps. So I genuinely don't remember if I brushed teeth or put on deodorant because my brain just ran through it so well. But the caveat of that is if all of a sudden one of my kids comes in the middle of my routine and is like, I can't find my shoe, and I go off to help them find their shoe, I don't circle back to finish the last 3 steps of the routine. And that's why I'm sitting in my 10 a.m. meeting going, deodorant. And then you're beating yourself up again for like, what grown woman cannot remember if she put deodorant on? So when you know, hey, that's just not how my brain goes. And so on my sink, my toothbrush sits out.
Yeah.
My deodorant sits out. So as I do my, wash my face, put on my lotion, like it's all right there. And I see all the things, I do them in order. And I won't lie. Like there's times where I'm like, I don't remember if I brushed my teeth. I'll go back and feel the toothbrush and be like, oh, it's wet. Yep, brush those teeth. But I know for most people, if they say that out loud, they are going to get judgment from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't say it out loud. They hide it. They're not going to say, I forgot to brush my kids' teeth 3 out of the last 6 days, because they're going to get judgment. Because yes, a normal person would do that. And a normal person remembers all those things, but we are different. And that's okay. The more time that we spend beating ourselves up is time and energy that we're not using to move forward.
Yeah.
And I've had to let a lot of that go. And it took me a while. I won't lie, I've been through a lot of therapy. So when you can get past that and know that it's not your fault, then you can focus that energy on, okay, well, what can I do that works? I don't have to have the perfectly clean bathroom counter that doesn't have anything on it. It is okay that I have lined up all of my items in a row so that I know they all get done. That's okay. It doesn't have to look like the Pinterest bathroom counter. And being okay with that is a journey. But when you know, hey, there's another 100 million people out there that deal with this, it's a whole lot easier to get behind and be willing to do the work because you know it's possible.
Yeah, I recently talked to a friend of mine, Katie Fredrickson, who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And it was a very dark time for her. And she said something similar, where that through a lot of therapy, and she had to, first of all, accept the fact that she's going to be on medication for the rest of her life.
Yes.
And if she doesn't take it, she goes to a very dark place.
Right.
And, that was something that she had to learn to accept. But then she also had to learn how to embrace the days where she didn't want to get out of bed. Like, I can't do it today. I'm not doing it today. The laundry will get done whenever it gets done. And, I'll tend to what I need to tend to, but that's all I have the energy for today. And, she said once she started to accept that, then that's when the freedom came for her to be like, okay, I know what I need to do in order to be my best self.
Right.
And it's going to look very different than what my neighbor does. Right. It's going to look very different than what, my best friend or my sister has to do. She said once she accepted that is when the freedom came, and similar things like, she leaves like notes for herself, like positive biblical affirmations for herself, because she knows that she needs those reminders. Otherwise, the hamster wheel of her brain starts going and she can't get off it.
Yeah, it is extremely common for people with ADHD to have a diagnosis of bipolar or anxiety or OCD or depression.
Yes.
Because that's, like I talked about earlier, that's that big blinking red light. There's the red flag of like, hey, something's wrong. You got to do something about this. And people will get treatment for that before they figure out that they have ADHD, because those are big problems. And it is so hard to be okay with taking medicine, because it feels like you are admitting defeat, that you are admitting, I can't do this without this help.
Yes.
And there is a huge stigma behind it, because there are so many people who have dealt with addiction and I think somehow, part of me wants to dive into this whole area, but it's a whole rabbit hole in itself of how we have somehow like squished these two ideas together of addiction being bad, which obviously it is a bad thing. We don't want people to be in that space. However, other medication is not bad. And yet somehow we've lumped them all together into, if you take this substance and put it in your body consistently, there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
And there's a lot of negative connotation that goes around it. And it fascinates me because in some ways, like if someone's a diabetic, we don't look at their insulin shots as a terrible thing. And I think it has something to do with that whole mental health
Yes.
aspect, that we can't see someone's bipolar. We can't see their schizophrenia. We can't see that physical manifestation so much. Whereas obviously if someone is having an issue with their insulin, like we can look at their face and be like, ooh, they don't look so good.
Yeah.
They need their medicine. It breaks my heart because again, it's going back to that acceptance of, it is hard to admit and to be okay that you are different and not like anyone else. And for a long time, I clung to that, to the idea that one day I would be like everybody else. And it's not possible. It's never going to happen. And so there's like a grief process that you have to go through in knowing that your life is not going to be what you imagined. And that's why I think, going through therapy is so valuable, is that is hard. That is a huge burden for someone to carry and to walk through, and to get to the other side it's not easy. So once you hit that acceptance point, then you can say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to have bad days. It's not going to go well. And you create these plans of, okay, on those days, it will look like this, and this is what I can accomplish, and I will keep all of my tiny humans alive, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And then on a good day, I can do these other things. And there's this huge lowering of expectations, because if you only have 30% good days or 50% good days or even 70% good days, you're not going to be able to do what somebody who's not dealing with this issue can do. So there is a lot of adjustment that goes into that.
That, and also to the acceptance that if medication is necessary, it's not going to quote unquote fix you.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make your life easier, maybe, hopefully, if you get on the right dosage and doing the work,
Right.
Combination with therapy. But it's going to get you to a different level of functioning,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not going to be the magic pill.
Right. And it's like this catch-22. It is not a magic pill. It's never going to fix the problem. So there's like a realistic level of expectation that you need to go into it. So once you have created a better environment for your mind and your body to function, then you're so much more able to employ all of the skills and the tools that you've accumulated along the way. But to get to that point, you have to find the right dosage and the right timing and the right medicine. And it's such a trial and error process to get there. But yet before you even get to that step, you have to go through the process of being okay with the medicine. Because something I hear all the time is that people say that it's a stimulant and it's just like meth. They're putting you on crystal meth. And it's like, oh my goodness, y'all, this is not how science works. No, yes, it's a stimulant. But also, because my brain is structurally different, that stimulant affects me in a different way.
Yep.
When you give someone with ADHD a stimulant, you actually calm them down, because what you're stimulating is the brakes.
Yes.
And people think like, well, this 5-year-old boy that's doing parkour off the desk in science class, you're going to give him a stimulant, we're going to have a huge problem. No, what you're stimulating is his ability to inhibit, his ability to stop and pause and go, is that a good idea? And giving him that chance to like allow his brain to slow down enough to pause and make a different choice. So one of the things that I'm always like yelling from the rooftops is that stimulants affect someone with ADHD differently because it's a neurological condition and you're not going to create an addiction. That's what I hear a lot of parents say, like, well, I don't want them to get addicted. I'm like, well, no, you can't get addicted because it's not affecting you in the same way. I literally could stop it tomorrow and I don't have a craving for it, like, because my brain is different. It absorbs it in a different way. It's stimulating my neurotransmitters to actually carry the messages across these synapses. It's not creating a craving response, but it is so hard as a parent to make that decision to put your child on medicine that you don't truly understand. Like, it's hard for me to make that decision to take medicine. To do that for your child is like, I mean,
yeah, it carries a greater weight because it's another human being that you're making that decision for.
that's one of the burdens of parenthood. Yeah, and because you don't understand. Yeah, and you don't know when you give it to your child, like, you can't put yourself in their head and be like, okay, how's this going? You're relying on a small child to explain that to you. That's one of the things I do feel like as well of that I can explain as an adult with ADHD is I can say, when I take this medicine, I'm actually way more chill. It tones down the anxious thoughts. It tones down the crazy hamster running in my brain. And it's not going to create an addiction. And actually, when you treat your ADHD well, that means that you are so much less likely to go to addictive substances for relief. Because the reason, like, this is not based on any research. This is just my personal opinion. I think most people who get into drug addictions and alcohol addictions, it's always because they're trying to escape something else that they're dealing with. And this is a way for them to escape. I think everyone would be shocked if they could actually go through the diagnosis process. The number of people with addictions who also have ADHD, I think, is an incredibly, like, ridiculously high number. I think that is one of the biggest drivers for people to go down the road of addiction in other places, because they just want to make their brain stop. Their brain goes all the time and it is overwhelming. Every sensory input that comes in, every noise, every light is overwhelming. It's all coming in and your brain is not able to filter that out. And so all the time you're having noise. Plus your own brain is constantly going with thoughts. So when you go to alcohol and you calm down, or you go to cigarettes and people say, oh, well, the nicotine makes me feel more calm. Nicotine's a stimulant. So if you have a cigarette addiction and you're going to it because it makes you feel calm, hey, maybe that's because your brain is different and it takes that stimulant in and gives you a different reaction. And that's why you like it, because it calms you down. So I feel so many addictions, I think, are just coping mechanisms gone wrong. And I think there's just a huge number of people with ADHD that don't know that that's what they're dealing with. And they have found some peace and quiet in those other things. And that's why they keep going back to it. So if you treat your ADHD in a good way, using things that aren't going to be harmful for you in the long run, and that can look like exercising every morning and watching the way that you're eating. Like, yeah, if you just cut out food dyes, you're not going to take away ADHD. But there are foods that irritate you more. So if you find all your healthy ways to treat it, then you're lowering the risk of addiction and having all the other, domino effects of not taking care of your mental health. And I mean, here I could go on my soapbox this affects the way people manage their money. People with ADHD are notoriously horrible with their money because they don't see the long-term goal. So they have a lot of debt in the way that they, discipline their kids, and the way that they choose to eat, the way that they choose to exercise. All these things are affected. Literally every decision of every day is affected by your ADHD. So when you treat it and you take good care of yourself, you will see the effects.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a ripple effect where your whole life will be better because you're treating the root cause of the issue.
I love that. What advice would you give the mom who's out there right now listening, saying, this is really speaking to me. This is starting to make sense, but I don't know what to do next?
The first thing is to ask for help. And finding a safe place where you feel like you could talk to somebody, even if it's not, obviously I think a medical professional would be one of the places you would want to start. And, on that side note, it does need to be somebody who's experienced with ADHD, because so many people, even doctors, are just looking at that 5-year-old going crazy. There's a lot of people that don't understand it. And so when you start, you need to start with somebody who actually knows about ADHD. So obviously a medical professional would be someone, and you can get information through your general practitioner, although they may not be as familiar. You can see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. They can do the diagnosis. So depending on how, your insurance works and all, that's a whole wormhole there. You want to start definitely asking for help in that arena. But I think what you could do literally today is find a safe space where you have a friend or a family member who won't judge you and say, I think that this is what I'm dealing with and I just need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I hope that a lot of people would find that in their spouse or their family, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes those people say, that's not real, or you're just, being dramatic, or, whatever common response we hear as people with ADHD. And if that is, that's okay. They don't know what it is. They don't understand it. And I've learned to not take that personally, because how would they know about this? How would they know what this is like unless they had to have learned about it? So if that's not the response that you were hoping for, that's all right. Who else can you talk to? Find that place where you can be safe and talk about it. So asking for help is always number one. Number two is learning about ADHD. Obviously my podcast has a lot of good information about it. And I have a free resource that has all of my favorite, my top favorite resources, I guess you would say, different books and podcasts. And no matter how you learn, I have a way for you to learn about what ADHD is. And when you understand how your brain functions, then you can make so much more forward progress. And then the third one is taking care of yourself. As moms, especially, we're terrible at taking care of ourselves. We take care of everybody else first. We want to make sure that our kids have what they need and want before we take time for ourselves. We make sure that our family's okay. We make sure our parents are okay. We make sure everybody's okay except for ourselves. And that is the foundation for caring for everyone else.
Yes.
Is caring for yourself.
So true.
You always hear, you can't pour from an empty cup, or you got to recharge your batteries. But I truly believe that self-care is underrated, because it's turned into this just take a bubble bath and recharge.
Yes.
And that's not really what self-care is. Yes, that might be a very re-energizing activity for you, but true self-care means taking care of your body, your mind, and your spiritual health. And when you are doing those things, which is not an overnight process, it takes a while to figure out what really gives you life, what really takes care of you, what truly re-energizes you and gives you the energy and ability to then take care of everybody else. It's a process. Once you learn that, you can then excel so much more in doing all of those other things. So those are my top three. Ask for help, learn about your brain, and take care of yourself.
I love it. Patricia, how can my listeners connect with you?
So I love Instagram. I'm at Motherhood in ADHD. And then I will send you the link as well. I have a special link just for your show. The listeners can go to patriciasung.com/feed your spirit. And there I'll have the top resources available. And I just put together a little helpful checklist of if you want to spend a little more quiet time with the Lord, and it is not happening right now, ways to just make it easy and start to build that habit. Because a lot of times we think, oh, I really need to sit down for an hour and spend my quiet time with the Lord. And you know what? Sometimes that's just not a reasonable expectation, especially if you have little ones, or you're taking care of elderly parents, or just these here pandemic times that we're still in. I mean, how do we make that doable right now? And we can look ahead for the big goal of spending huge amount of time with the Lord, every day. But for now, how do we break that down and just make it a little snippet?
I love it. And for my listeners, all of those links will be in the show notes. along with how you can connect with Patricia and the link to her podcast, Motherhood and ADHD. So before I let you go, I love to ask my guests, what are 4 things you are loving right now?
Okay, let's see. I would say the book that I've just been like loving on right now is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is not specifically an ADHD book, but it's very ADHD friendly and how you break down habits to their tiniest piece so that you can implement them well. And it's very, very ADHD friendly. So I'm really enjoying that book right now. The other book that I read almost every day, not quite every day, is New Morning Mercies by Paul David Tripp. And it's literally 1 page of a devotional. So it takes like all the thinking out of it. You just flip to the date and you read it. And it has, if you have extra time, there's an extra verse at the bottom that you can really dive into. But having that like preset for me makes my Bible time actually happen. So I really love that book. I am a sucker for office supplies. So I love my Papermate Flare pens. And I just bought the tropical color pack, which is very happy. Makes me very happy to use it because it's winter and the tropical colors make me happy. I'm a big bullet journaler, so I'm constantly writing notes. And if I don't write it down, it literally doesn't exist. So that journal is well loved. And since we're back into the swing of things with school, I live by my Echo Dot. I mean, Alexa literally runs our mornings. You know, she says like, it's time to get up. It's time to brush teeth. She keeps us on schedule. So I don't think I could function without her in the morning. She takes a lot of the stress out of it. So
I love it. I have not seen the tropical flare pens yet, but I'm going to be on the hunt for them. Definitely.
They made me really happy. It's like
yes,
turquoise and papaya and.
Well, Patricia, thank you so much for coming on today and opening up and sharing, your experiences and your knowledge. It's definitely going to reach someone out there.
I hope so. I really want anyone whether or not you have ADHD, but to know that you are not broken and the Lord made you the way that you are on purpose. So you're not alone in the struggles. There's nothing new under the sun. So whatever you are struggling with, I feel like Satan purposely makes us feel like we are alone and the only one dealing with this problem so that he can separate us from the herd and really like dig his claws in. So when you are feeling that way, it is time to reach out. And I know it's the opposite of what you feel, but it is time to find someone else because you are not the only one dealing with whatever you are dealing with. There is literally someone else out there on the planet who's dealt with it. And there's always someone that you can reach out to and connect with and know that you have support.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the main things I always tell people why I started this is, to share stories of not only hope and encouragement with faith, but also to let people know, like, you are not alone. Yeah. And I always say, like, even if I only have one listener and this episode is reaching that person, then I'm doing God's work.
And that's all we can ask for is to follow through on what he asks of us.
Isn't Patricia incredible? I loved it when she reminded us that no matter what we are going through, we are not alone, and that it is a tool of the enemy to make us feel that way and reach out for help. Do you know someone who might be struggling? Please share this episode with them. Have you subscribed to Feed Your Spirit yet? If not, go to your favorite podcatcher and do that now. And while you're there, you can also rate and review this show. It helps us get the word out about the work that we are doing. Also, if you want to learn about all the ways that you can support the work, please feel free to visit my website at JillDobrowanski.com and just click on the donate button or the shop button where you can get your own Feed Your Spirit wear. And until next week, my friends, God bless, and don't forget to feed your spirit.